Renee Good. And we knew they had no interest in investigating the ICE agent who shot and killed her. We knew that. We learned that shortly after she was shot. We knew they wanted to investigate her widow. We also learned that. But thanks to incredible new reporting from my colleagues Ken Delanian and Carol Lennig, we now know they wanted to investigate Renee Good herself after she was shot 3 times and killed by an ICE agent. Now, the Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty, I just mentioned this to Chris, who was shut out of this investigation by the Trump Justice Department, is standing by with her reaction to that breaking news. The great and one and only Andrew Weissman is going to join me as well. That news is, I keep saying this, but it's worth repeating. It is so shocking and it is disgusting. That news makes me want to say lots of words I cannot say on TV, even on a Friday. But what has been clear from the moment Renee Good was killed is that the Trump administration was going to do anything they could to lie and gaslight their way through this. What has also been clear is that the American people know what they saw when the ICE officer killed Renee Good, and they know what they have seen as ICE has continued to terrorize their communities ever since. Want to know how I know? Well, this was the scene on the streets of Minneapolis today. You can see it, and there's so many like this. Thousands upon thousands of people taking to the streets as part of an ICE out protest, demanding federal immigration agents leave their city. And I know it's hard to get a true understanding of this by just looking at video, but those thousands of people took to the streets on one of the coldest days of the year. And wherever you're preparing for Snowmageddon, I promise you it is colder. It was colder than that in Minneapolis today and across Minnesota. The high today, was -9 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind chill got as low as 35 degrees below zero. I kid you not, it genuinely got so cold that our MS Now camera on the ground froze. Not like the picture froze technically like that. The camera got so cold, it stopped working. That's how cold it was in Minneapolis today. And so the crowds of protesters there were massive. They were this massive. Look at the screen right now. These were the crowds outside of the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport this morning, protesting the airport allowing ICE to fly deportation flights out of one of its terminals. Protesters also said they were trying to send a message to the airlines Delta and Signature Aviation, which operate out of the airport, pressuring those airlines to join them in pressuring the airport to stop cooperating with ICE. And roughly 100 clergy members formed the front lines of that protest, and you can see them on the screen, kneeling and praying, singing, and peacefully refusing to leave on the road, leave outside the airport's main terminal. They were all arrested today, peacefully and without incident. Now today we also saw hundreds of businesses shut their doors across the city of Minneapolis in solidarity with the protesters. It was part of a general strike, with organizers urging residents no work, no school, no shopping, ICE out. And we're going to speak with one of those business owners who shut his doors in solidarity. I just mentioned this to Chris too a little bit later in this hour. Now, organizing a protest this massive, organizing a general strike, getting businesses that have already suffered from weeks of diminished business because of this ICE crackdown, getting so many of them to shut their doors in protest, all of that is extremely hard on any day. But on a day when the high was -9 degrees, organizing something like that feels, well, nearly impossible. And yet the people of Minneapolis did it. Thousands of people took off work and took to the streets in the bitter cold to demand ICE get out of their city. And that tells you a whole lot about the people of Minneapolis, of course, and the people of Minnesota, including how pissed off they are at ICE. And the reasons keep multiplying. There are a lot of reasons they're pissed off at ICE. I mean, we brought you the news earlier this week of masked federal agents dragging a U.S. citizen, Chong-Li Thao, out of his home in St. Paul over the weekend, forcing him out into the bitter cold while he was wearing nothing but his boxers and slip-on shoes. Now, DHS claims that the arrest was made amidst an attempt by ICE to detain convicted sex offenders they believed lived at his address. But Mr. Thao is not a sex offender. He says he has no criminal record at all, and he's a fully naturalized U.S. citizen. And to make matters worse, we have since learned that the man ICE claims they were looking for was already in prison. In fact, he has been locked up since September of all the way back last year. And ICE was aware, or should have been aware, that the guy they claimed they were targeting was in prison, because the agency had already requested that he be put into their custody upon his release next year. They were tracking all of it somewhere there. But despite all of that, they grabbed this poor man, they dragged him out into the freezing cold and detained him and questioned him for an hour anyway. We've all heard a claim about what this is all about. I'm so sick of hearing this over and over again from ICE, from the Trump White House, from anyone who's speaking on their behalf or defending them, that they are only going after the worst of the worst. They are only targeting people who aren't following the rules. But the thing is over and over again, that is proven to be a complete lie. By now, you've also likely seen the images of this adorable 5-year-old little boy, Liam Ramos. Now, that's our picture of him on Tuesday, when masked federal immigration agents detained him and his father outside their residence as Liam was returning home from preschool. Now, a local school official says that the federal agents told Liam to knock on the door to his home to see if other people were inside, essentially using a 5-year-old preschooler as bait. I mean, the idea that any administration, anyone, would use a 5-year-old to lure people out of a home, all in the name of their cruel immigration policy, is so disturbing. It's hard to imagine anyone with a soul sees a photo of that little boy in his bunny hat and feels like this is all okay. How is that even possible? His family and his lawyer also say that Liam and his father were asylum seekers. They basically say that they entered the U.S. legally at an official border crossing site with the government's permission. They had requested asylum, and the case is reportedly still active. So even by the Trump administration's own cruel logic, Liam and his father were following the rules. Now, the Trump administration has made all sorts of claims to justify why they arrested Liam and his father. All of them so far are contested.
The facts are actually that this little boy was abandoned by his own father. His own father was being approached by ICE agents when he ran and abandoned the child. Our law enforcement, in these frigid temperatures, stayed with the child, tried to bring him into custody with the mother, who actually would not take the child into custody, which is so sad, it's so horrific.
When they went to arrest his illegal alien father, the father ran. So the story is that ICE detained a 5-year-old. Well, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to let a 5-year-old child freeze to death?
First of all, both of those two people have to sleep with themselves at night, so there is that. But that is the administration line. They claim Liam's father ran and that no one at the scene would take the 5-year-old. So they did, for his safety. That's what their claim is. Now, local school leaders dispute that account, saying that several bystanders saw Liam's father run not away from his child, but towards his house to alert his wife not to open the door. An adult who lived in that home but was outside at the time told the Washington Post that they begged the agents to leave Liam with them. The chair of the local school board even arrived at the scene while this was all unfolding. She said that she and others also told federal agents that school officials could help, saying, quote, there was ample opportunity to safely hand that child off to adults. But they didn't. They arrested 5-year-old Liam in his bunny hat. And we have since learned that they have flown Liam and his father to the South Texas Family Residential Center in Dilley, Texas. And here's how Greg Bovino, the Border Patrol commander in charge of the operation in Minneapolis, who you can see here personally throwing a gas canister at protesters earlier this week, here's how Greg Bovino justified sending 5-year-old Liam Ramos to an immigration prison.
That child is in the least restrictive setting possible. When I say that we're experts, both Border Patrol and ICE, in dealing with immigration cases that involve children, probably the most experienced anywhere in the United States by any domestic law enforcement agency. I challenge any other law enforcement agency anywhere nationwide to show me the fantastic care that ICE and U.S. Border Patrol provide children.
I cannot even, but let me just start with the facts here. Now, while DHS, as you just heard, claims the facility where Liam and his father have been brought in Texas meets federal detention standards and undergoes regular audits and inspections, just last month, court filings painted a very bleak picture of the same facility. Lawyers who visited this facility and spoke to the families detained there alleged horrific conditions, such as denial of critical medical care and worms and mold in the food. Court filings about the facility described one child who had not received appropriate treatment for an ear infection and was experiencing hearing loss. and another child who had food poisoning and was told to only return for medical care if they vomited 8 times. Now, no surprise, ICE of course disputes all of that. But that is where Liam and his father are now, despite no evidence that they did anything wrong, despite them going through all of the proper processes to request asylum, despite Liam being just a 5-year-old preschool kid. Again, the reasons to be furious with ICE right now, particularly in Minneapolis, keep multiplying. People are mad about how immigrants are being treated. People are mad at how U.S. citizens are being treated. People are mad at how protesters protesting all of this are being treated. And underpinning all of this, at the core of the outrage in Minneapolis tonight, is still the rage over the ICE shooting of Renee Nicole Good. And tonight we unfortunately have even more outrageous news on that front. Like I said at the very top of the show, tonight, MS Now's Carol Leonnig and Ken Delanian report that the Justice Department sought to investigate Renee Good herself, despite the fact that she was dead because of an ICE officer, killed at the hands of a gun from an ICE officer. And I just want to read directly from that piece. It says, quote, after Good was killed earlier on January 7th, FBI agents initially drafted a search warrant to obtain her car to reconstruct the path of bullets that an ICE officer shot into the vehicle. They were instructed to redraft their warrant and change the subject of the investigation from a civil rights probe investigating the ICE agent to an investigation into a suspect assault on an officer, meaning an investigation into Renee Nicole Good. A federal magistrate judge rejected that warrant, noting that Good was already dead and could not be considered a suspect for a warrant. Now, the situation was so outrageous, and it is outrageous clearly, just even knowing those details, that 2 sources say an FBI supervisor in the Minneapolis field office resigned over it. And for what it's worth, an FBI spokesperson tells MS Now that it does not comment on personnel matters and that the facts on the ground do not support a civil rights investigation. Okay. But when the federal government is snatching people off the streets of Minneapolis and lying through its teeth basically every time they open their mouths, when they're going after kids and using them as bait to meet their arrest quotas, when they are refusing to investigate a fatal shooting by one of their own agents and are digging up dirt to smear the victim, I think it's pretty clear why an entire city would shut down to protest in sub-zero temperatures. And now the whole country is watching, as they should. Joining me now is Hennepin County